Kevin Stefanski with this statement yesterday. Case Keenum will be our starter tomorrow night, and we've got full confidence in him to lead us and do the things necessary to put us in position to win. Baker fought really hard to play. He's a competitor, obviously wants to be out there, but just couldn't make it on a short week. We know he will continue to do everything in his power to return as quickly as possible. Here was tonight's starter, Case Keenum, on the challenge he'll be facing.
I'm built for this. This is what I've done my whole career, not knowing if I'm going to start up until the game time, to not knowing who's out there with me, to introducing myself to players while I'm calling a play type stuff. So, I'm excited. What better chance to, take advantage of an opportunity than on Thursday Night Football. I know these opportunities don't come around very often to be a starting quarterback in this league, only 32, per week. So I'm ready to take advantage of it.
Oh, the life of a backup quarterback. With that, we welcome in a guy who's never been a backup. He's a front-up. That makes no sense. Head coach, former head coach Eric Mangini, with his game plan today. Don't laugh at that. That was stupid. Coach, how can the banged-up Browns get back on track tonight against the Denver Broncos? I said it was a dumb joke. You don't have to give me a sympathy laugh. I got it. I was fully aware that it was dumb as the words were coming out of my mouth, Coach.
That's why I was laughing. I was laughing at the words that came out of your mouth, but I appreciate it. Thank you for the lead-in. So looking at tonight's game, one guy that Case Keenum doesn't want to introduce himself to is Von Miller. And what the Browns have to do tonight, the starting point is they've got to protect the offensive tackles. And whether it's the two starters who may potentially come back from injury, but I don't think they're gonna, or the backups that they had last week, they've got to give them some help. They gave up 5 sacks against Arizona. And what that means is you can't be in a bunch of empty formations where there's clean edges. You've got to use the backs and tight ends to chip on the tackles. You've got to throw the ball quickly. You've got to run screens. You got to give those guys a chance to survive. Otherwise, it's going to be a long night. I'd say the second thing, and this is going to help them not just tonight, but moving forward, is they've got to have David Njoku and Austin Hooper make an impact. And these are two guys that a lot has been given to him. Hooper came in thinking he had $42 million. He had 270-plus reception seasons prior to coming to Cleveland. He's extremely talented. And Njoku, we saw 2 games ago what he could do, where he had 7 receptions for almost 150 yards and a touchdown. And if these guys get involved in the offense in a more meaningful way, it's quick answers for the quarterbacks. It's big body answers for the quarterbacks. It forces the defense to defend the interior part of the field, and it'll make a really good offense when everybody's healthy into a great offense. But they desperately need those guys tonight. And then the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is the secondary has to improve the communication. And it's pre-snap communication, it's post-snap communication. And they've put a lot of investment into the secondary. There's 2 1s, there's 2 2s. They spent money in free agency on John Johnson, and then there's another $40 million that they put into it. But you need someone to be an alpha. Someone's got to control what's happening in the secondary, and everybody's got to be on the same page. And I'll show you a great example of what that translates into. This is last week against Arizona. And the Browns are the 4 defensive backs have the 4 eligible receivers on vertical routes. That's a responsibility. If those guys go vertical, that's a responsibility. You've got DeAndre Hopkins down here at the bottom, obviously Arizona's biggest threat, and the guy they have to take away. And you're going to see Ronnie Harrison is looking backside for number 3 vertical. Even though he's pushing over to Hopkins, who's going to run an in-cut, he's still looking backside for his responsibility. Now, Denzel Ward thinks he's going to pass Hopkins to Harrison, and now they're both looking at the tight end coming across that number 3 vertical. And look at the space that Hopkins has sitting behind him. So at the end of this, there's 3 Browns defenders covering a tight end who has no catches and no touchdowns in the season, and they're leaving the guy who has the 2nd most touchdowns in the NFL wide open to fair catch a punt in the back of the end zone. And it can't happen. You can't have uncontested throws in the secondary. That's a problem. But when you have uncontested throws in the secondary to your opponent's best player, that's a really bad problem. And Stefanski Kevin's talked about adding extra walkthroughs and trying to do things, but this has to be taken care of, and it's got to be, if it's simplifying it, simplify it. Whatever you have to do, you can't have these type of plays.
All right, so that's a great breakdown, and it's illustrative of what has been, to me, one of the most confusing things about this NFL season, which is, why is the Browns defense terrible? Because it's not personnel, I don't think. I mean, I've seen each of these guys the guys on this defense be excellent in the NFL, and the young guys had excellent collegiate pedigrees, and we saw them play well last year. So that's confusing to me. I want to flip it to the other side of the ball for tonight's game in particular, Coach, and ask you a question about Case Keenum in this regard, which is, he is the ultimate version of a make-it-happen quarterback. I covered him when he was starting for the Texans. He had an amazing collegiate career, and he can make plays where it's like, wow, how did you do that? And he can make a lot of plays where it's, wow, why did you do that? If you think you're not a huge underdog, and the Broncos are not a great team, right? If you think if we just don't screw it up, we should win this game, what is the conversation like between Stefanski and Case going into this moment where you're trying to make sure he's not trying to do too much because you don't need him to do too much?
Well, first of all, I don't think this is an example of where their talent level is so much better than Denver at this point. They're down both starting wide receivers, both starting offensive tackles, both starting running backs. The defense has had significant issues. They lost their starting Mike linebacker this past week. So they're dealing with their own problems. Now, the advantage for a guy like Case and for the Browns is that it's a short week. So there's not a ton of game planning that can go into it from a defensive perspective where you're going to see a lot of things they haven't done in the past. So the short week actually benefits a backup in this situation because of the limited looks he's going to get. Now, that being said, you do have to sit down with a player like this and explain to him, we don't want you to necessarily go win the game. We don't want you to be a hero. We want to make sure that we're in a position to collectively win the game. And you can call plays to manage that process as well. Things where you're not putting them in long yardage situations, or you're not forcing them to run around with the ball, just trying to make sure you have high percentage passes, things like that.
Yeah, Coach, I do think, he's going to have to go out and play well and be a little more than a game manager. Because, as you say, I mean, without the running game, I don't think without Chubb and Hunt, if Chubb doesn't play, that they're going to have a running game. So he's going to have to make some throws, and especially if the defense struggles, because Denver will put up some points if the Browns continue to play poorly on defense. So we'll see. I mean, he's obviously got the history with Kevin Stefanski. I'm sure that helps him a little bit. But I think he's going to have to go out there and make a few plays. To your point, Nick, he could make the wrong